So far, more than 2,100 people have been killed on both sides of this violence. 22 Americans are confirmed dead and at least 20 remain missing. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now heading to Israel as the U.S. ramps up operations to get any American hostages out of Gaza. CBS News reporter Haley Ott joins us now from Tel Aviv, Israel. Haley, both sides have been trading rocket fires, over the past 24 hours. What are you hearing about the damage in Israel and in Gaza?
Hello. Yes, there have been rockets fired from Gaza. We've heard that at least one hit a hospital in a town in the south of Israel. We don't know if there have been any casualties there. And there have been airstrikes in Gaza, which have killed at least 1,100 people since Saturday's attack in Israel started its retaliatory strikes. That has created a humanitarian crisis. 200,000 people, according to the UN, are displaced. As you said, power has been shut off now. People have been waiting in line for bread. We've seen reports. So this crisis is very much unfolding.
Well, Israel may be preparing to launch a full-fledged ground war in Gaza. I'm wondering if you can tell us what that might look like.
We've been talking about how troops are massing at the border for the past few days now. That involves troops that were already serving potentially, and then also about 360 reserve soldiers that have been called up. Many of those, or some of those, have been sent to that region. We've just heard recently that the troops have now massed there, and they're, quote, ready to execute the mission we have been given. We don't know what that mission is. We still have to see. In terms of what a ground operation in Gaza could look like, we do need to see. I mean, it could look like tanks rolling into Gaza, but we will have to wait and see what happens in the coming days or perhaps hours.
And Haley, we know that Israel has also traded some rocket fire with Lebanon, which is north of there, in the last 24 hours. Is there fear that the situation could get worse?
Yes, so there's been exchanges of fire with Lebanon, and actually just before I joined you, there were a number of drones spotted that had come from Lebanon's airspace. I believe that those drones are now no longer in Israeli airspace, but people were alerted to take shelter in the north of Israel. And I know that our CBS News team that is up in that region heard explosions. They aren't sure if there were any confirmed hits or if those were interceptions, but that's obviously a concerning development for people who are watching this conflict and hoping that it doesn't escalate to a regional one.
Certainly a precarious situation with so many civilian casualties. Haley Ott, thank you.
The desperate search to learn who is being held hostage in Gaza, as you just heard, is intensifying.
Israeli officials say up to 150 of its citizens were taken hostage by Hamas. These are images of an Israeli Defense Force soldier whose father says went missing during Saturday's attack. 19-year-old Itai Chen is a U.S. and Israeli citizen. He is serving his first year in the IDF. His father, Ruby, also a U.S. citizen, told us about the last time he heard from his son.
We have been received a notification from the IDF stating that his status is missing in action. What does that mean? That means that since Saturday, nobody has been physically able to identify him in the field. No one has seen him in a hospital. No one has also declared that he has been deceased. So basically, he's not been found. And after 60 hours of fighting, 70 hours of fighting, it might be a good assumption to say that he might not be in the state of Israel.
Chen says he hopes to meet U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's expected to travel to Israel today to meet with senior leaders.
More airstrikes demolished entire neighborhoods in Gaza overnight as Israel continues its retaliation against the Hamas militant group responsible for Saturday's attack. Meanwhile, basic supplies for some 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza are running low. Israel stopped the entry of food, water, fuel, and medicine into the territory, while Egypt shut down its border crossing.
Joining us now from Gaza is Salma Sharab. She's a fifth-year dental student. She feels uncomfortable talking about politics and Hamas, but is joining us to discuss the situation where she is. Salma, thank you for being here. Talk to us about the situation on the ground where you are. What have you been experiencing?
Well, the situation is very difficult, especially that I've lived my whole life in Gaza. So I know what's an aggression like. But this time, after 7 aggressions I've witnessed, never witnessed anything this harsh, very close. No one is safe around me. I've already evacuated my house once, and I had to come back to it because I didn't find anywhere safer to stay. I even have my bag ready next to me right now. So anything happens next to me, I'm ready to run to find a better place to stay. As you know, the internet connection is very terrible. We ran out of water, the electricity, the fuel is stopped from the country, from Gaza. So we're literally trying to survive as long as we can until this aggression is over. And yeah.
What are you doing without water? And you say that you're ready to run. Where would you run to?
Exactly. I would run anywhere and come back because I would realize that there is no safe place rather than my house. There's no shelters. People usually run to the hospital, but the hospital is so full right now to the point where if the electricity is cut off for many more hours, it will be a whole massacre in the hospital. All the people won't be saved because there's lack of materials, lack of doctors. It's way more full than it should be.
Salma, what do you want people to know about this conflict? Obviously, you said you've lived there your whole life, and this is not normal. It's not what you're used to experiencing, and what you are used to experiencing sounds like something most of us couldn't even fathom. But what do you want people to know about this conflict in terms of those of you in Gaza?
I want people all around the world to keep digging more into the reality of the situation. Because we as Gaza and Palestinians are very tired of explaining to the people that we are a victim here, that we're suffering, that we're losing water, electricity, internet. We know all of that. But what's the next? Is there any solution? Is there anything that we can stand on that could give us hope to the future? Because me personally, I already lost my future here. All the places I work at are destroyed to the ground. I'm actually at my graduation year, so I won't be able to finish that. I need to find a plan B right now because my university is destroyed. My patients are calling me that they need to fix their teeth, and I'm like, I can't do anything about it. I thank God that you're alive in the first place. So hopefully we all find a future after this aggression is over. And I'm okay if things return to their usual habit, because I don't think they will.
What do you see as that solution?
I see that like people would stand with Palestine, understand us, make it easier on us, find a future that is safe in my own home. Like, I don't want to leave my country, obviously. So I need to stay in my home, but feel safer, feel that I am heard by everyone. And maybe things will get better, inshallah.
Inshallah. Salma Sharab, thank you. Biden is meeting with Jewish community leaders at the White House today.
He will deliver remarks there about the war between Israel and Hamas. In a speech yesterday, the president condemned Hamas's attacks, calling them a, quote, act of sheer evil. He said the U.S. will make sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself.
CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett joins us now. Major, what do you make of how the president's been expressing his support for Israel, and how are others receiving what the president has to say?
Well, this is a cataclysmic moment for the state of Israel, and any American president would do what President Biden did yesterday, which is provide absolute support and reassurance that the United States will not abandon Israel in this dire moment of need. And the moving of an aircraft carrier and its strike force nearer to Israel is not only to reinforce whatever Israel does militarily, but if possible, deter any other bad actors like those in Lebanon, specifically Hezbollah, from widening this war. Because the president knows, as the Israeli prime minister knows, this is a very fraught period. If another front of this war opens to the north in Lebanon, then Israel will be fighting a two-front war, and that will complicate things enormously. It will already be complicated if there is, as everyone expects, a ground invasion of Gaza. That will be lethal, door-to-door urban warfare, deadly for Palestinians, deadly for Israeli soldiers, and difficult to eradicate Hamas from its entrenched positions in Gaza. So what lay ahead for Israel and its American supporters is going to be very difficult. One interesting contextual note, no one in the U.S. government has known Bibi Netanyahu longer than Joe Biden. They first ran across each other in the early 1980s when Joe Biden was an up-and-coming senator and Bibi Netanyahu was an up-and-coming staffer in the Israeli embassy here in Washington. They've watched each other climb the political ladder. Their arrangement and their relationship has been recently strained by the formation of a very nationalist, hard-right government under Netanyahu's leadership in Israel that doesn't look anything like the ones Biden has seen in Israel before. And some of the decisions taken by the prime minister have rattled the United States, specifically on judicial reform, in which President Biden, unusually for an American president, weighed in on that. That strained the personal relationship between the two. But all that is being set aside because, as I mentioned before, this is a cataclysmic moment for the state of Israel, and Biden and the U.S. will be with it come what may.
Biden mentioning today that he had his fourth phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu. So we'll see what comes out of that outside of what we already know, which is the president making it crystal clear that he stands with Israel. On America Decides tonight, you're speaking with House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Michael McCaul about the conflict. What does he want to see Congress specifically do to help the Israelis right now?
Elect a speaker.
Yeah,
Number one.
well, that's a great start, right?
It's got to be a start because, as Mike McCaul has mentioned, there is nothing that the House of Representatives can do in this moment. It can't pass a resolution of support. It can't have any debate about how much and how strongly it supports Israel. It can't provide any additional funds for Israel or Ukraine, both of which are priorities for the Biden administration, until it is organized under a speaker. There are some signs that there might be breakthroughs at this hour about Republicans at least putting forth a consensus nominee and possible House vote later on today. We'll see how that plays out. But McCaul has also said there needs to be a reevaluation at some point, probably not immediately, about this ghastly intelligence failure, not only within the Israeli Defense Forces, but the American partners. How did no one see this coming? And what are the implications for Iran and its complicity or direct or indirect involvement? Lots of things on the chairman's mind. We'll explore them later on today.